I need to get some more light on my face. I have
You know,
lights. Yeah, I have lights at home, but
I think we can we get started off now? I'd like to welcome everyone for joining us for this special edition of the Malcolm Renfrew Interdisciplinary Colloquium. Really quickly, I'll remind you that next week in our Tuesday kind of usual time, we have a presentation coming up on the exploration, science, and celebrity, which I think will be really interesting to hear about. And then today, I would like to welcome Leonard Garrison, Christopher Fund, and Miranda Wilson speaking about Bach and Telemann, friends and rivals, and giving us kind of a preview into the Idaho Bach Festival coming up.
thank you very much. We are, of course, embarking next week on this amazing festival that's been going on, I think, for 10 years now, right, Miranda?
Yes, that's right.
And of course, one of the founding members, I think the founding person of the festival was Mike Murphy, great colleague, great friend. And then you took it back over, or you co-directed with Mike, correct, Miranda?
Yes, I did for a while, and then we sadly lost him, but then we got to have you.
So well, this is exciting for us, and we've had so many different kinds of performances through the years. Of course, we collaborated with ACMS on the Handel, the London Handel Players, which was just one of the most incredible things I think that we've ever had here. And this year, of course, we're virtual. So, and we have an amazing program of Telemann by Dr. Leonard Garrison, our own distinguished professor of flute in our department. So we're really excited about that. Just before we have Leonard's presentation, I want to give you a rundown of how you can catch the festival and what's going on. So we begin on October 28th with Leonard, and he'll talk about this today, but he's performing one of the landmark pieces in the flute repertoire, Telemann's 12 Fantasias for solo flute. So we'll talk about that today. And then on October 29th, we'll have a concert of Bach, Handel, and a very special guest who will speak, Raymond Erickson, who I think was the founding director of the Aaron Copland School of Music in Queens, New York. A wonderful guy. We're going to see a little bit of him in a bit. And in addition to that, we will have Aneta Larty, one of our colleagues here. We have Theodora, now I can't, Proud. I'll go to the easier part of her name. And Joseph Proud, her husband, will play. Christopher Wilson, who is a percussionist at Washington State University, will play a Bach partita. And then on October 30th, we will have Bach's Violin Sonata in A minor, performed by Giselle Hillier, fabulous, wonderful colleague of ours, violin professor here. And then the Suite in G major by our very own Miranda Wilson. That's Bach's Suite in G major. All of these can be easily found if you go to the Lionel Hampton School of Music website. There are links to the Idaho Bach Festival on the left-hand side. Sometimes you have to go to events on that left-hand side, and you can pull down these links to Zoom presentations. They all begin at 7:30 p.m. So you should be able to watch those from the comfort of your own home. And we will too, because we're recording them ahead of time next week. So we'll be watching with you. With that, I hand it over to Miranda, and she can talk a little bit about the details.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having us here today. It's wonderful to have this platform to bring some publicity to the Idaho Bach Festival. And we have a real treat in store for us with Leonard Garrison's presentation about Telemann. I just wanted to say a couple of words about the programs for the Idaho Bach Festival. Chris has already mentioned some of the things that we're going to do. So the program that will be broadcast on the 28th of October, of course, is Leonard Garrison's Telemann program, which will be very, very exciting. It's such glorious music and such great scholarship. On October 29th, the program will actually be a concert full of arrangements of Bach's music. Bach is one of those rare composers whose work can sound amazing even when presented on an instrument that is not the instrument it was written for, even one that perhaps didn't exist or not in its current form in Bach's lifetime. Christopher Wilson, a professor of percussion at Washington State University, has made his own arrangement of one of Bach's violin pieces for the marimba, an instrument that I don't think that Bach knew about, but it's going to sound amazing. Dora Proud, our very own oboe professor, together with her saxophonist husband Joseph, is going to play her own arrangements of some Bach inventions, originally two-part inventions for the harpsichord, but they sound great, we think, on oboe and saxophone, so that's really exciting. Then, after the presentation by our 2020 Idaho Bach scholar, Raymond Erickson, Aneda Lati, our professor of piano, will be playing Handel's Chaconne, originally for the harpsichord, but she's going to be playing it on a Steinway grand piano. So this will be an event you do not want to miss. For the last broadcast, which will be on October 30, my colleague Giselle Hillier and I are going to play some of Bach's most popular pieces of music. Two of the solos for solo violin and another for solo cello. So I thought, you'll see I've got my cello today. I thought I'm just going to give you a little preview at the end of this presentation, so stick around and I'm going to play Bach's G major prelude that everyone loves, including me. Now, over to you, Leonard Garrison.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward. The Bach cello suites are at the top of my desert island music list, and I love the way Miranda plays Bach. And so why would I propose to perform Telemann on a Bach festival? To explain that, Chris interviewed our Bach scholar for 2020, Raymond Erickson, and I have the part of that interview where he talks about the relationship between Bach and Telemann.
Of course, on this, speaking of another, I guess, cosmopolitan composer, Telemann, you can correct me if he's not cosmopolitan.
Oh, absolutely. Probably more so than Bach.
Probably more so than Bach. We have, of course, our distinguished professor of flute is offering in several evenings an amazing concert of Telemann's music and playing an entire edition of music that he is producing. And so I thought it might be wonderful to talk about Bach and Telemann, maybe some connections between them, and how those two might have gotten along in the German musical scene.
Yeah, well, that's a very good topic. And Telemann, you know, has sort of been suffering. Bach's reputation was such, developed such in the 19th century that there wasn't room for Telemann, although Telemann probably wrote 10 times as much music as Bach did. But, you know, it's just amazing. Bach wrote 4 orchestral suites that at least we have. Telemann wrote over 100. Telemann wrote over 1,000 cantatas, over 100 passions, I think. You know, I mean, it's just amazing what the amount of music that he wrote. But it's a different kind of music. And it is less, if you will, I don't want to say provincially German as Bach's was, but Bach, you know, stayed in Germany. And although he studied everybody's music and was certainly aware of the French and Italian repertories, Telemann went to Paris. He lived in Poland. And so he, you know, had an international kind of experience that Bach never had. So in that sense, he was a much more sophisticated and cosmopolitan person. Also, he was older than Bach. And so he got a head start. It's very clear that Bach learned a lot from Telemann. I'm not sure that Telemann learned a lot from Bach, but Bach certainly learned a lot from Telemann. And we know that they knew each other. Telemann made it his business. He was a very ambitious professional musician. I mean, he knew how to make a career. Bach was he was so focused on music, he didn't have time for local politics. But Telemann was very good at that. And but Bach knew it was helpful to know people like that. And so they got to know each other. We know that C.P.E. Bach, in his obituary of his father, mentions how, especially when Bach was young, they knew each other. That doesn't mean as children, but in their young professional careers. And there were definitely personal connections. Bach thought enough of Telemann to ask him to be godfather to his second son, Carl Philipp Emanuel, who turns out to be the most important of his sons. And it's interesting that C.P.E. Bach succeeded Telemann as the head of the musical establishment, the city establishment in Hamburg, which was one of the major posts in Germany. So, there were definitely connections there. And of course, we know that Bach spent a lot of time in Leipzig, 27 years, the last 27 years of his life, as the cantor of St. Thomas. When Johann Kuhnau, the previous cantor, died in 1722, the town council of Leipzig reached out almost immediately to Telemann, asking him if he'd like to be the successor. That was the automatic first choice. And then when Telemann came and looked the job over and so on, then of course went directly back to Hamburg to do a deal. And so he turned it down because he got what he wanted out of the town fathers at Hamburg. So, and only then, after consideration of several people, in the next year was Bach finally appointed. He was appointed, by the way. He was the first choice at that time. It wasn't that they necessarily, for various reasons, the others didn't work out, and Bach chose to accept that position. As a final point, I thought I just came upon this and just doing some work for this. When Bach died, it was customary for people to write poems on the deceased, and Telemann wrote such a poem, and I have it here in English translation. It's not that long, about 14 lines. Sure. And I'd like to read it if I might.
Yes, sir.
And so it starts out: "Let Italy go on her virtuosi vaunting, who through the sounding art have there achieved great fame." Now, Italy was famous, the country of music, right? "On German soil, they will also not be found wanting, these musical virtuosi, nor can they here be held less worthy of the name. Departed Bach, long since your splendid organ playing alone brought you the noble cognomen, the Great. And what your pen had writ, the highest art displaying, did some with joy and some with envy contemplate. Then sleep, the candle of your fame ne'er low will burn. The pupils you have trained," he was famous as a teacher, "and those they train in turn, prepare your future crown of glory brightly glowing. Your children's hands adorn it with its jewels bright. But what shall cause your true worth to be judged aright? Berlin to us now in a worthy son is showing," because at that point, Bach's son, C.P.E. Bach, was at the court of Frederick the Great before he went on to Hamburg. So that does give some sense of the relationship between Telemann and Bach.
Well read.
So that kind of sets up my performance of the Telemann Fantasias. And I'm calling my presentation Telemann 12 Fantasias, an ingenious solution. And you'll soon find out why I call it that. Here is a picture of Telemann. Oops, sorry. And he was a almost direct contemporary with Bach, only 4 years older, but he lived a lot longer, 17 years longer, because Bach died in 1750. So an ingenious solution to the problem of writing for just a poor solo unaccompanied flute. The limitations of this medium are that it's pure melody. It's what we call monophony. There's no harmony, there's no counterpoint, and there's a limited tone color. So how does Telemann create a wonderful sequence of pieces? Well, first of all, he writes very systematically. These 12 pieces are in the 12 best keys for the Baroque flute, the flute of the time. And if you know anything about Baroque music, you know there's a close association between the different keys and different affects or different characteristics and moods. And so each of these fantasias is its own child with its own characteristics, and there's no repetition between them at all. And you notice how systematically they are ordered. They march straight up the chromatic scale from A major through to G minor. The other thing, as we'll see in a minute, Telemann entitled these fantasias without bass, but he actually writes the bass line into the flute part. And I've circled these notes, and Miranda will be very familiar. I'm just going to play you the bass line, and she has played thousands of bass lines that sound like this. So on. And so if we, you can hear the bass line in there. And so on. So very clever of Telemann to include the bass line in the flute part. And it would take a very creative person to figure out how to write counterpoint for a solo flute. And throughout this set, there's a sense of more than one voice at the same time. But specifically, in most of the fantasias, there is a fugue. And a fugue is, you know, usually 2, 3, 4 voices. And it's a fugue usually starts with one voice playing what we call the fugue subject or theme, and then another voice comes in on top of the first voice, and so on, and the voices are stacked. This page is a picture of my edition that's coming out later this fall. And one thing that I've done that's unique is the fugue starts here where it says tempo giusto in measure 11, and I identified this, there's a 2-measure fugue subject, and then the upper notes of the following 2 measures are that same subject, and the lower notes are, if you pretend to listen in this way, the first person continuing in their line. And so my edition has a very simple kind of fugal analysis. It points out where all of the fugue subjects enter. Another special thing about these fantasias, Telemann really knew French music, and French music at heart was dance music. And so there's at least one dance in every fantasia, and including the whole gamut of dances. And dances are always have specific characteristics, like a bourrée is in 2 and a courante is in 3. They have typical rhythms and typical affects associated with them. And they also have social connotations, like a minuet is a very high class dance, but a bourrée, for instance, is a down and dirty peasant dance. And so what does a flutist do when COVID hits and all of the work has disappeared? Well, I got obsessed with these Telemann fantasies, and the first thing I did was I reviewed all of the current editions. There are 15 editions, and all of the recordings, and there are 50 recordings of the complete set. And I wrote this up in the Flutist Quarterly recently published this review. And I just wanted to give you a taste of the many different interpretations of these pieces. You know, they're everywhere today, but the earliest recordings appeared in the 1970s, which is very, very recent. And kind of the classic recording is by the French flutist Jean-Pierre Rampal, who likes to play fast. So obviously he's playing on the modern flute, but the Baroque flute has a totally different sound. And most people don't play these pieces today the way that Rampal did many years ago, but they use less vibrato. They use a different kind of sound to sound more like a Baroque flute. So Emmanuel Parius, a wonderful flutist, in his recent recording takes a very Baroque approach to this.
Writing's not that easy, but
Sorry,
Grammarly can help.
there was an ad.
This sentence is grammatically correct.
So very discreet use of vibrato and a kind of a wooden tone quality and a certain freedom that is associated with true Baroque playing. Now, the classic Baroque recording is by a wonderful player from the Low Countries, Barthold Kuiken. So I'll give you a sense of what this sounds like on Baroque flute. And another Baroque player that's more recent, Jed Wentz, I actually went to school with him, and he's American, but he's made his career in Europe. And he takes more freedoms with it, but this is also a great recording on Baroque flute. So one thing that's typical of the Baroque players is there's a lot more variety and subtlety of articulation. Actually, the pieces have been recorded more often on recorder than flute, although that's not the original intention of Telemann. And this one is rather, any purist would not like this recording by Maria de Martini. She just takes Telemann's original writing as a basis for it. She does multi-tracking and improvises over what Telemann has originally left us. Oh, another stupid ad.
When school isn't a place you have to be, why not go to school where
So there is some Telemann in there, but there's a lot added to it. And, you know, flutists are very possessive of our repertoire. I didn't think I would like these fantasies on any other instruments, but I was disabused of that viewpoint when I heard the wonderful French oboist, Francois Leleu. So you get a sense of the that these are everywhere these days. Now I want to go to talk about my review of all the existing editions, starting with Telemann's own. He engraved his own pieces, and this was an early engraving. He didn't do very well. It's not easy to read. And people debate on exactly when he did this. And there's only one copy extant in a library in Brussels. But it's a very strange cover page because he doesn't put his name on it. We know it's by him. And he says they're fantasies for the violin without bass. But it is not violin music. It doesn't have any double stops. It's restricted to the range of the flute, and it's written in all the keys that flutists like to play in. And, you know, it's very idiomatic for the flute. So this is what Telemann's edition looks like. It's kind of smudgy, and it's very crowded because he felt each of these fantasias is 2, 3, or 4 movements, and it takes about 5 minutes to play. But he felt that he had to fit each fantasia onto one page. I grew up with the edition that most flutists play. It was the first modern edition published by Bärenreiter in 1955. And we've learned to trust it's a very good company for publishing music, and they always publish what we call urtext. And that means that they don't put anything in here except what Telemann wrote. And so I used this edition to play and teach until about a year ago, and I realized that it has a lot of different things in it than Telemann wrote. Many details. I don't have time to go into them, but a lot of notes that are different. One thing on this page that the bottom of the page starts with a 2-bar introduction and adagio, And the note at the end of the second measure, Telemann didn't write that note. So most of these changes, and unfortunately there's no preface to this Bärenreiter edition explaining the choices they made, but I think most of the choices were that they're not mistakes, they're just the editor saying, well, Telemann couldn't have meant that, I'm gonna fix that, those kind of changes. But flutists are totally unaware of that. And subsequently, there have been two really reliable Urtext editions, and they have copious notes and much more faithful text. And they also print the facsimile of Telemann's own engraving. Now, I want to talk about Baroque ornamentation, because when we perform these pieces, we don't just perform straight what's in the music, but we are expected to add ornamentation. And Quantz, a great writer from that period, said that ornamentation should be used like seasoning in a meal. You need your salt and pepper and everything else to sell the piece. And what better teacher than Georg Philipp Telemann himself? He wrote a set of pieces called the Methodical Sonatas, or Methodische Sonaten. And you can see that there's a simple unornamented line at the top. And the second line features his suggested ornaments. And this is how I learned to ornament these pieces from Telemann himself. And so here's a picture of my edition coming up. And then I'll play for you my recording. This is what we call a binary form. The first section is repeated. So you can see my ornaments on the repeat, and the second section, and then the ornaments of that. Just to save time, I'll just play the first half of it. So here's the repetition with ornaments. All right. So my edition that's coming out, here's what's unique about it. It has all of the ornamentation written in that I've written. It has an extensive preface with performance notes and historical background. It has the facsimile of Telemann's original and that simple fugal analysis. And I've added my own dynamics and articulation, but according to Baroque principles. And I've put in metronome marks. But I've retained all of Telemann's markings. So this is really a teaching edition. It shows students how to ornament. And my recording will also be released on Centaur Records this fall. And the cover of that is a picture from the 18th century of Hamburg, his city where he's working. He was in charge of music in all the churches, and you see them. Instead of skyscrapers, all the city's skylines were church steeples. And what I like about this is the cows and horses grazing outside the city walls. And so please join me next Wednesday night at 7:30 to hear the complete set of 12 Fantasias by Telemann. So now I'll hand it back to Miranda.
Thank you so much, Leonard. I found that completely fascinating. I can't wait to hear the broadcast, and I also can't wait to buy your CD. This is a real treat. Well, from Telemann back to Bach, I thought just to hopefully encourage you to tune into our performance that will be broadcast on October 30, I would play a little Bach prelude from Suite No. 1 for solo cello.
Bravo, Miranda. Oh my gosh, so great. She makes that look so easy. Just to recap for everyone, join our festival this year, October 28th, 29th, and 30th at 7:30 p.m. And you can go to the LHSOM website, go down to events, and you can find the Bach Festival and ways to register for the Zoom presentations. Thank you.
Are there any questions from our attendees today? Either on chat or on mute.
Leonard, I mean, Telemann is always wonderful, but was there anything specific that kind of drew you to sort of focus in on Telemann right now?
Yes, it's that, I think this is the greatest single collection of music for solo flute that has been written. And since I was unable to collaborate in the orchestra or in the Northwest Wind Quintet, and with many different, even with a pianist, it's a good time to explore Telemann. And I'm not alone. I attended a webinar on the Telemann Fantasies put on in England this summer. So it's really in the air right now. But it's been fascinating, and gave me, I've been collecting these ornaments for many years, writing them out for many years, and to collect them all in one group and prepare them for publication. It's been a wonderful fascinating project.
Leonard, if you don't mind a question from me, well, an observation and a question, really. Um, I loved listening to your own recording of your ornamentation, and I was struck by the fact that although it was a sort of premeditated spontaneity, to me it sounded improvised when you did it the second time with those beautiful ornaments. In your opinion, do you think that when you have sort of the second time where you can add some extra things, do you believe in making the tempo a little bit more flexible to afford you the time to get them in?
I don't think so. That movement that I played is a sarabande, and especially if we have dance movements, I think the tempo has to be pretty consistent. There's a little flexibility, but the flexibility that is there is within a beat. And in teaching my ornaments to students, they're much too straight at first. They see a set of sixteenths and they just play da 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 da. And if it's an ornament, you play da 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 da. There's the flexibility is within a beat, and that's why they sound improvised, I think.
Ah, that's so interesting. And I must say, I loved also your presenting the recordings of such a wide variety of performance, just showing that there's more than one way to play great music. I love that you showed us some significantly different recordings on modern instruments, then some on period instruments, also completely different from each other, but all glorious. I wasn't sure about that one on recorders, but I'm sure it would grow on me if I gave it a chance. It never occurred to me that Telemann's flute pieces could sound so good on oboe, so that was wonderful too. Would you feel comfortable stating what is your favorite recording, other than your own recording, which will be everybody's favorite, but do you have a particular favorite?
I like different ones for different reasons. And the article that I wrote, I pointed to a number of them. So for instance, the Rampal, I've known it for many years, and I love his playing and everything, but I wouldn't play it that way. So the Paru that I showed, I feel like for the modern players, he's the most Baroque, the closest to Baroque approach. But I'm a little disappointed. He's very conservative in his ornamentation. So, there's some aspects of some of the recordings that I like and some that I don't like. There are, in addition to the two Baroque flute recordings that I played for you, there's a wonderful one by Rachel Brown, who was here in the London Handel Players, and she's one of the greatest Baroque flutists in the world. And I think she, above everybody, understands the dance, because that's what they do in that group. They're musicians and dancers, and dance is so much a big part of this music, and she knows exactly the gestures to make within those dances.
I hope nobody minds me monopolizing the question time. It's just, this is such a fascinating subject. One final question from me.
Sure.
So, do you think, given the wide variety of ornamentation that we can do in Baroque music, and given the fact that we know that these musicians, when they performed their own music in the 18th century, would add ornaments to it, and given the fact that Bach and Telemann themselves were some of the great improvisers of all time, under those circumstances, do you think it's ever possible to do too much?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, that would be one of my criticisms of Rampal, is that, I get the feeling from reading these 18th century authors that the purpose of ornamentation is not to show off. You know, it's to enhance what is already there. And many of the modern flutists really show off. They just really muck it up with tons of ornaments. And so when the piece starts becoming something other than what it originally was, then that's too much. And to use the analogy, Quantz's analogy of spice, if you have, you know, more spice than that, spicing enhances what is there. So, you know, you have to be careful with your cayenne. Great. I think probably that's a good note to end things on, and it's getting to be almost 20 after. So thank you for attending, everyone. Thank you to my colleagues. And
Thank you, Leonard. It was amazing. Amazing. Thanks, guys. Well, we'll see you all at the Bach Festival. Or we won't see you, but you'll see us.
bye-bye.
Bye.